Welcome back, everyone, to Merge Conflict, your weekly developer podcast, talking about all things in the world of development. Now, Frank, we're recording this on the 2nd. Apple event is on the 8th or 9th or something.
I believe the 9th, James. It's our Christmas of the year. No, I don't know. It's my favorite event, though, because that's when all the stress that we were talking about last week of getting my apps out really hits home, and then all the real stress begins. That's how I think of the fall Apple event.
Well, we will be our traditional Merge Conflict selves and put out the reaction video 6 days after the event, so you can relive the magic of whatever has happened at said event. But Frank, two things I want to talk about before we talk about a topic that leads up to this topic is, I think last week we might have been a little bit too harsh on Mac OS. I don't know. I don't know if you have any thoughts.
Are you a convert? Oh, no, I don't think we were harsh enough, because I've been using the latest Safari, and my goodness, the latest Safari is not working so great. But it's a beta. I'm used to betas. It's fine. I still think that the UI is still ugly, though.
Okay. Let's get to know. You got a whole week to rehash, so we're good. The other update I want to talk about is that we talked about a few weeks ago of getting our app from GitHub Spark to a Blazor application, to deploying it to the web that people could use in a PWA, and then converting that into a Blazor hybrid application with .NET MAUI. And then we talked about the CI/CD fun. And I did it live on the podcast. And Frank, just this last week, my app was officially approved and it's back into the App Store.
Woo! Bravo. Congratulations. I think you took the most circuitous route I've ever seen to updating in an app, because you didn't actually update it. You rewrote it once, rewrote it a second time, and then ported that rewrite to another platform. I think that is perhaps not the recommended way to update an app, but it worked for you. It worked for this app.
And this is the first time that my app that was actually developer removed from the App Store went back onto the App Store. So I didn't create a new app. I reignited it. It rose from the depth, basically. And it's back onto the App Store.
Now, this is a free app, right? So you didn't have to worry about someone who paid for it 5 years ago, I want to get their sales again. You're just like, fine, I'll reuse the SKU. Bump that version up to, I think you got up to version 3, even though it's kind of a 2, but you had to go up to 3 for reasons. It's cool. But that's the one nice thing about free apps. You can just release them and let them go out there. You don't have to worry about remonetizing that initial purchase.
Yeah, this one was pretty straightforward. I did have ads in the original one. And then you could, for example, remove the ads for 99 cents or something like that. I don't think anyone even bought the app or removed the ads. I didn't even remove my own ads. So, so I think their ads are removed. So that's good. There's that. So, but yeah, it's ready for distribution.
So you gave a bonus to everyone.
It's out there. Free upgrade. It's ready for distribution. My Scorekeeper - Scoreboard Plus in the App Store now. So, because it used to be called Scoreboard.
My Scorekeeper hyphen. Oh, okay. So you have to have the dash. Okay.
Yeah, My Scorekeeper.
Do it one more time.
Space Scoreboard Plus.
Is that good for SEO? We'll find out.
I don't know. I did on this a few quick updates, hints, and things there on this release. That was fascinating because this is my first fully, migrated MAUI app over to the App Store. So the things that I really liked really quick was that the app icon. So what I learned is that I know we'll have to redo the app icon in 5 days.
Yes, you will.
But the app icon, which was nice about it, is at a high level, if you just keep the background SVG a solid color, and then you make the foreground like white, for example, or black, it'll automatically do the light mode, dark mode, tinting, all that stuff automatically, which is super cool. That worked nice. Same with the splash screen. That all worked really good. And my entire icon, SVG, everything was generated with GPT-5. So thanks.
Nice.
It's gotten pretty good at SVGs. Not gonna lie about it. So pretty nice there. And then I open up the simulators and I took the screenshots that way, the old school way of doing it, and that seemed to all work. Just going and doing it on a Mac and launching it from VS Code. Everything was written in VS Code 100% with this.
Now,
It was
you
100%.
say old school. Sorry, you say old school for the screenshots, but I really don't know of a better way at this point. I'm still doing manual screenshots too. The only small good thing is it's basically down to you have to have one set for iPhone, one set for iPad.
Yes.
And you don't really need the Mac if you're just going to share the Mac code. It used to be you had to do like 5 variants for iOS. They got rid of that finally.
Yeah.
So that's good.
Thank goodness. And I did.
And can I also interject? Sorry,
go ahead.
one more.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
You mentioned the icons, and this is just, remember everyone, and there's a little PSA out there. Apple's changed its icon format for the 3rd time now. And it's a layered file now where you specify a background and a foreground, much like how Maui was doing it. So I actually have hope that like the Maui build tools will just be upgraded to keep it from the developer's point of view the same, because now it can actually, the new Apple icon file format, like all file formats, is just a zip file with a bunch of SVGs in it. And so they could easily just output that in the Maui build tool. So I'm looking at you, David. I hope that you just upgrade the Maui build tool versus making devs actually have to go get, I forget what it's called, but Icon Composer or something like that for Mac to do your own layer icons. I think the Maui should have a very smooth upgrade path as long as they redo that step.
I really hope so. That's my hope and dream, because this one was pretty simple. Like I actually originally was like, oh, add a gradient background and then once I added a gradient background, it was like, no, like you get, I don't know how I built it, but once you do a gradient background, it's like, no, you no longer get different modes, like light theme, dark mode. It has to be like a solid
it's all
color.
gradients. You need your gradients. Your app is so gradient heavy.
I know. Well, I will say so far we have, Frank, in the last week since it's been live, gotten 2 downloads. All right.
Oh, jeez. Thanks to the 2 listeners who have downloaded it. Sadly, that's not me. I'm still using the beta, so I have to go get that puppy.
So it's out there.
Are you going to buy some search ads? Like, put some money into this thing, man. You got to do your marketing. You can't just release an app anymore and hope it's going to sell. That doesn't work anymore. You gotta put some money down on the marketing.
I gotta say that my apps seem to still be making some sweet moolah, by the way. This is in the last month.
Okay.
I've had 75 in-app purchases, and I made $133 on the App Store.
All right.
And I mean, it's out there. What?
Which app is that now?
I'm looking.
I'm looking. It's one of those apps.
it's all my cadence, man. My cadence, just going to town. Wow.
It's those health people. You know, you find a health app that you like, you don't want to change that.
They got the Pro going. That is amazing. That is
might be time for a version 3 of that one.
Well, I was just getting ready to remove all the sales part of it because store kit stuff. So eventually I have to turn that off. I guess.
Oh no, I'll just write you a new store kit. I have experience binding to silly Swift these days.
Yep. Well, so it's good. Well, I had removed all the stuff, and that's good. But what's interesting about this, and what gets us to our topic of the day, and if you did watch the VS Code live stream last week, which I'm sure all of our listeners did, we had Dan Delamarsky on from Microsoft, who I've worked very close with on MCP stuff, talking about spec-driven development. And funnily enough, last week on my YouTube, I was vibe coding out a new application, and I actually started with specification. So I talked about doing a PRD, a product's requirement document. I broke it into different feature documents that was outlining and highlighting and had it implement the application. I would say poorly, because I did it traditional way, which is just me telling it to create a PRD, to break it down, to do a thing. But we have test-driven development. We have domain-driven development. What other kind of types of development is there? Vibe-driven development.
There was an old one called EDD, example-driven development, where you would actually it was kind of like test-driven, but it was different. It was differenter. James, I feel vindicated because for about 20 years now, I've been saying agile. I don't think this agile thing's very good. I was taught in a conservative environment with waterfall design, where you
Yep.
document everything, you design everything up front. By the time you're coding, you have so much documentation that you're basically just implementing the spec.
Oh, the docs are already
And
written. The docs are already
yeah.
written.
And as a side tangent to my tangent already, I used to find like as I was writing the docs for my apps that didn't have docs, that's when that was like a whole nother round of testing because you would start to document a feature and you'd realize that the UI is not good enough and you would build on that. Anyway, I feel vindicated because I feel like we've come all the way back after a terrible detour into the terribleness that is agile. We're finally coming back to let's design our software. Weird idea. Let's think about it before we start coding.
Crazy.
It's crazy. But it's worth a try. It's worth a shot. Because you know what? It's easier to type out a document than it is to write some code. And that's always been the truth. It's just, as developers, we all prefer to code. Let's just be honest. We prefer to code rather than document. It's fun to write an algorithm. It's fun to write performance tests. It's fun to write test. Honestly, that's why TDD took off, because at least you're writing code. But now we're back. We're back, baby. We're writing docs. Our job is to write docs, and now they're called specs and PRDs, but whatever, arose by any other name.
Yeah. Alan Ritchie was trolling me a bit because he's like, oh, we're just like docs writers and we're all this stuff. I'm like, in a way, yes. I mean, ideally, one thing that I've been doing obviously is I'll like implement a feature and then document a feature. However, one thing that I've obviously noticed is when I work with Copilot or the coding agent, the more context we talk about context, the more context we give it, the better it can do. So I know that if I give it just like one line sentence, which is like, hey, go create me an admin dashboard that gives me statistics on like usage, it will try to figure out what that means. Now, the coding agent has a lot of time, so it can investigate the whole code base. Whereas perhaps if I'm inside of VS Code or a code editor, it's going to try to respond quickly. So it's going to look at the context that I give it, and it's going to do its best to come up with what it can put together. Is that APIs? Is it a front end to back end? Now, had I given it, I would like a beautiful dashboard that's broken up into 4 quadrants. That's blah, 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 blah. And then it, blah, 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 blah. And these are all the different components. Yeah. Screenshot, idea, XYZ, how it would work, how I would get it. I need admin access. I need all these things, the requirements, the XYZ, blah, blah, blah. I can give it to that. And one, I've now documented what I want. And then ideally it creates what I want. So spec-driven development, as quoted by Den in his beautiful github.blog article, is instead of coding first and writing docs later, in spec-driven development, you start with, you guessed it, specs, docs. It's a contract of how your code should behave and becomes a source of truth your tools and AI agents use to generate, test, and validate code. The result is less guesswork, fewer surprises, and higher code quality code. Now, the difference here too, what I think about is, when I got my first job out of college at Canon, I was given a binder, which was here is how the code works. Here's what the app is, and like here is how things work. We had an architect, right? And the architect had the docs and had this, and it was a whole thing. And like as we evolve the product, added new features, we would do that. These tickets, if you're in GitHub, these issues, these tickets, you're in Jira, you're creating these and you're refining different things, right? You work with a product person, you work with a designer, they're creating these specs. And people are like, oh, this is crazy. I was in the live stream, like, this is crazy. Like, why are you doing this? I'm like, and Alan made a point. He's like, most companies do this. Like most businesses, most companies do what James is doing. Like that's what Alan was saying. He's like, it's funny because he's trolling me, but he's like, but this is what enterprises do, right? Like, so the idea I think here is, how do you trickle that down in this agentic way to help us actually use these agentic tools to do spec-driven process at the beginning or during, development, adding features, doing bug fixes inside of it. So I've been doing this for a long time. I just think about it as like, how much detail are in there? And I would say sometimes I'm pretty sloppy and it's like one sentence, like it's not even anything. It's just like a title. It's just like, do this thing, go. Right.
Yeah, and then you get into the functional spec versus the technical spec. Like, you want to specify what the app does, or do you want to get into the nitty gritty of how it does it? But I think it's good. We are truly in the wild wild west. We have these powerful things called LLMs that agentically want to help us. They want to please us, and we have this thing called vibe coding, which is kind of coding by the seat of your pants. You don't really care about much, other than you need a product and you want to get that product out. And so this is quite a bit different, because the vibe coding for me is kind of just a real time thing. You're saying, I want this, you look at it. It's honestly more the agile style, where you're just like, oh, I don't like that. Let's change that. Let's do this. Let's add that. That's vibe coding. This is quite different. And again, this is kind of where I prefer, because for me, talking to these AIs, a lot of it I've really enjoyed as just brainstorming. So talking through, what should the app do? How should it present its information? What features do I need for a minimum viable product? What features should be in the pro version? What can I monetize? And you're having these high level discussions. And my favorite thing to do was have a big chat history like that. And then at the very end of the chat, I say, all right, summarize everything we just said into a 10,000 word markdown file, so that I can feed that to another AI and just say, go implement this, please, for me, or something like that. In the case of the coding agents, where you have it working on like PRs or issues in GitHub, the docs matter. I found if you give it a bad bug report and a bad PR, it's going to generate bad code. That's how it is. So I think we've all been, although it's the wild, wild west and vibe coding is very fun, I think a lot of the professionals have been leaning toward this. Oh, okay, I just need to get better at my spec writing and actually detail out. So I won't say we're all becoming documentation writers. I'd say we're all becoming PMs and lead devs. The role of the junior dev isn't quite as, I mean, the AI is basically fulfilling the role of the junior dev now.
Well, I think that with this, I think what you said is also valid. I think that you can make sure that you're adhering to spec-driven development and documenting your code even after you've been vibing. Like, one thing I've been doing is, implementing, like, I've implemented this whole like API key structure. So I worked with it. I did this thing, blah, blah, blah. And the last thing I did is I said, okay, like, now document it. Like, you did the thing. We refined the thing. So like, I didn't do spec-driven development. First, I was like, here's the idea of what I want, blah, blah, blah. And then I kind of worked through. And in this fashion, I worked a lot. I love working with the coding agent. I think, like, because I have so many meetings, I'm not doing as much coding in real time. I'm doing things in the background agents, basically. And even how I use Copilot and VS Code is like most like fire and forget and then come back to it later. So it is almost asynchronous programming, in the background. Is after I do it, it'll have this whole chat history, all the history, whether I do it in the editor or I do it in the coding agent. And then I'm working through my mind. So I didn't do the spec first, although I should have. The idea is, okay, now that we've done it and it's in a working state, I want this stuff. Now let's make sure that we document it. So when we add new features, when we add bug fixes, there's this context, which is like, here is the contract of what we created. So then I can then reference that document, or the AI can find that document, the memory of what it is later that it's working on. Yeah. And then additionally, from that, you can also have it create external documentation. Like, I had it write the entire documentation for calling the API, getting an API key, using the MCP server, right? And then I could generate, I could actually now generate, things on the website to do that as well, which is kind of nice. So I think that's really cool. But the thing I've tried to do is pull that stuff more forward. And one of the things that I've talked about, and I often demo when I am talking about AI coding, is I'll start on like github.com/copilot, or I'll start inside of just VS Code with Copilot there, and I will just start ideating with it. Like you were saying, like, I'm ideating with this part of AI of what I want, whether it has the context or it doesn't have the context. Maybe I have the idea, maybe I'm adding a feature. So I'm like, don't write any code. There's almost that ask mode.
That's always my first sentence. Don't write any code. Let's just have
Don't write any code. Don't do it. Don't write any code. But what I want to do is just work on this, and then I'll kind of back and forth. And I'm like, okay, now let's take this and put it into a plan. Then I'll copy and paste it into an issue, or then I'll do something else. And that's how you know, if you've seen my issues on Feedback Flow, that I've actually put a substantial amount of work into specifying out what I want. Now, better yet is to actually have like a specs folder, like a specification folder in my project that it can then implement and go iterate on and do things as well on, and then keep up to date too. Like as you add new features to, let's say, the API, make sure you update the spec so it's always up to date every single time, and you can ideate. But for me, at least, I've just been using the tools that are available. And in this blog post, what Den talked about is a new toolkit. Kit?
Oh boy. Oh boy. Someone wrote some code. Okay, let's be clear. Spec-driven development, I think, should stay a little bit a style. But of course, you can codify your style by writing some tooling to make your life easier. Because you were mentioning like files that you're putting into your repository. So like I'll often start with a README and then I'll write like a functional spec. I never knew the term PRD until we started playing with Spark or what. Yeah. So I always just called my functional spec. But then there's also like the instructions files that are automatically added to your context. And that's what I'm always looking at, is things that are automatically added to the context. That's where I try to put my most important stuff. But anyway, all that said, there is now a new toolkit, James, that you've just told me about. It's news to me, so I assume it's news to someone out there, because I can't keep up with all the shows. So that's why we're here, so I can ideate on it also, not just that AI is ideating. I shall ideate. I hate that word. So tell me about this new toolkit, please.
Well, so the funny part is that last week for the live stream, like I really wanted to get this working on my machine. And it's called Spec Kit. So it's on github/spec-kit. That is where it is at. So it's an open source project. It works with numerous amounts of AI developer tools, such as GitHub Copilot, obviously, but the Gemini CLI and Claude Code as well. So works with many things, because actually the whole idea, like you said, is like spec-driven development isn't like proprietary. It's just like should be something that everyone could use.
Style.
Yeah. And something like Kiro, which is Amazon's AI code editor, right? Like their whole idea is that they built spec-driven development like into the code editor. So like when you go, you're in code mode or spec mode. So you're starting to see this integrated into tools as well, which is cool. Now, the problem that I have, Frank, is that I am bad at command lines. Yeah. And what I found out, Frank, is that I am extremely bad at command lines on a Mac, because I installed UVX, whatever that thing is. I installed Python. I just don't know how to get it to work on the freaking shell. And I was like, how come the Mac shells just have to be so frustrating? Just give me the Windows terminal and PowerShell and just make it work. Just install Python. Just make it show up on my thing. I don't understand.
You know, the joke is, I'm sorry, this is a total side tangent. This has nothing to do with spec-driven development. But every time someone new to Python says, I don't understand how to get Python running, someone out there runs another wrapper over Python to make running Python easier. Yeah. Then they can't figure out how to get that one working. So someone writes a wrapper over that one to make running Python easier. And it's just, this UVX thing is like 10 layers above actually just running some Python code, because everyone's trying to solve the problem of making it easier to run some Python code. It's terrible. I mean, I know there's everyone out there who loves UVX, but you're just adding lipstick to a pig, okay? And it's just another shade of lipstick that fails constantly, especially for people who aren't used to all the in and outs of Python. Now, me, as a weird Pythoner, I think it's super easy to run Python. I think if you know how the Python path works and you know how to point it at a stupid packages directory, it's trivial. Python's easy. But if you're not used to it, I know it can be horrendous, especially when people make you use silly tools like UVX. But anyway, UVX is supposed to make it easier to run.
I don't know how to get out of this thing now. Okay, I can type in Python into my terminal, then nothing happens. But if I type in Python 3, then now I'm inside of Python 3. I don't know what I'm doing. And I can't get, if I type in UVX, I installed it, but it says it's not there. Do I need to modify some dot file? Seems ridiculous.
No, so the problem is sorry, side tangents, but the Python that is shipping with Mac is set up in a very strange way. In such a strange way that most people hate using it. So they tend to install a Python over the Mac one. And worse than that, if you have Xcode installed, Xcode, of course, comes with its own versions of Python and all that too. So the problem is you probably installed UVX into the non-standard Python environment. Sorry, it's easy to do. And then UVX just isn't happening on your machine. I recommend just typing in pip3 install UVX. It may or may not work. Who knows? It really depends at this point in time. The worst part is UVX is supposed to install its own Python also. It's supposed to have that capability, but that fails all the time too. So who's to say?
Well, that worked, and it says I already have it installed. Perfect.
Oh, congrats, great. James. You're all set.
Perfect. And then it was like some error, metadata generation failed. Perfect. Okay. Spec Kit.
Perfect.
Talking about CLIs. So anyways, it's a CLI command line tool.
Sounds like someone should compile it into a real binary is what it's sounding like to me. Just
give me a GUI.
No one ever wants to package their Python things.
Well, so the whole idea here is that it makes you the center, like specifications, the center of the engineering process. So instead of writing a spec and setting it aside, the spec drives the implementation, checklist, and task list breakdown. Your primary role is to steer. The code agent does the bulk of the writing. It works in 4 phases. 4.
Okay. 4.
Specify. You provide a high-level description of what you're building and why. The coding agent generates a detailed specification. This isn't about technical stacks or app design, Frank. It's about user journeys, experiences, and what success looks like. Who will use this? What problem does it solve? How will they interact with it? What outcomes matter? Think of it as mapping the user experience you want to create and letting the coding agent flesh out the details. Crucially, this becomes a living artifact that evolves as you learn more about your users and their needs. This, to me, is kind of the PRD part of it, the specification. Okay. What the heck would you say we're doing here, Frank?
I honestly, you can break up a project in so many different fashions that here's the thing. What's nice about Spec Kit is you can go see its code, and what it's actually doing is it has a bunch of template files that it's kind of filling out, and you can go read the template files and see like roughly how it's the same AI problem we've always had. When you ask the AI to do everything all at once, it'll fail at that. So at this very first level, all we're trying to do is break the problem down. So you're giving it vagaries. Here's an app. I want it to make me $1 million over the next month. I want it to be UI based because I don't want to work on the CLI. And it should be written in .NET 12, even though it's not out yet. And then it's going to take all your vagaries and turn it into something meatier that actually has some details. Obviously, it's going to make assumptions during that point, but it's going to try to add the details that you neglected to provide and just kind of add those in. A lot of these are just normal trade kind of things, like, the app should launch quickly, it should behave this way, it should look good. All the things you don't bother to type in because you just assume. It's throwing in all the assumptions to make your life better. So you give it some vagaries and it's going to fill in the details for you.
Yeah, I could think of it as, well, actually, in this plan, one thing you mentioned was like the stack. And I think in this plan, it's not even the stack. I don't think it cares if it's .NET or not, because that's sort of the next part of it. But for example, in the API, the API key, and the part that I talked about, which would be like, what am I planning and why am I building it? Well, I want to build an API key functionality in my application. I'm building it so power users and paying users of the application are able to access the API, but also be rate limited based on their usage so they don't have full access to it in general. And the user journey that they would get is they would go into their settings, request an API key, and the admin would manually approve that. And then from that action, they're able to use the API key when they make requests to the API. So in that instance, I'm not talking about like how, what events, what APIs, blah, blah. I might specify there and I would say like, maybe like what things they're able to do that. And the APIs they're able to query are analyzing, feedback or generating reports, right? So maybe like high level, what they can do with it, but maybe not implement like all of the query parameters that are in it, or how they call the
Yeah.
API, or is it a header? Is it a query property? Like, how are they getting it, right? So, and then it would kind of flesh that out of like, what does that actually look like for that feature? So if Frank came along later on, Frank, and was like, hey, I want to add and evolve this API, you could look at this specification and understand what is actually in the app and how it's implemented, hopefully.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There are a few, just reading through all the templates, there are a few platform considerations. And I want to say I appreciate Spec Kit already because they are bringing up UI Kit into the fold. A lot of these AI-driven development kind of libraries, they don't only do web apps. It's a little bit annoying like that. But it's fun, even in all their templates and everything, they talk about UI Kit. So, for example, they have a technical context that they want to establish in your plan. So in that case, you're specifying a language. Is this Python? Is it C Sharp? Or is it Swift or Rust or any of those? And it'll figure out which one of those. And it'll ask you, I think, for clarification if it needs it. Then it'll ask you, how do you want to do storage? What dependencies are you willing to have? Do you want to have tests or not? Because who knows? And then, of course, the most important thing, what is the actual target platform we're going for here? So although it's not outputting code or anything, you are establishing the overall technical context for it also, in addition to planning out. This really feels like the very first couple questions you ask yourself when you decide, I want to write a new app. Is it a web app? Is it this app? What language is it written in? The very most basic questions you would ask yourself.
Yeah, and even new features added to an existing app, right? Like, you wouldn't have to specify that, but you could maybe be adding a new feature. Okay, where is it in the back end? Is it the front end? Does it need to be both? Blah, blah, blah. Are there any considerations, right? Because the next plan, or the next part of the process, is the planning part, which is the more technical part. So you specify, then you plan. And this one is exactly what you did. It kind of standardizes the technology. It helps you integrate into the requirements, performance targets you may need. And then this is where you kind of get super detailed. So the whole idea here is that you can make these internal docs available to coding agents, and then it can iterate through your architecture patterns, standards, things like that with it. So I think you have like high level specification, and then you have like these broken down technical implementation details before you actually like, they're not tasks, because I guess the next part is the task breakdown, where you actually break the spec and the plan into parts to it. And that's the idea, is chunking the work. So I did this actually on the live stream, which was, I wanted to do the dog insulin app, but I wanted to make it a native mobile app. So I was like, I learned a lot from vibe coding. That was Spark, was like what I wanted it to do, what I didn't want it to do. And I came with a high level idea. I would say that my idea was too ambitious to break it down into parts. But what I did do was I broke it down into like the spec of, here's what I want in the app. And then I did kind of create a high level plan that it was going to be a Maui app. There's going to be this blah, blah. And then I said, break it down into a task list of all the different things that I need to do. And it broke it down to like 15 different tasks, like super high level. And those ones were like, the task breakdown was like, it was different feature breakdowns. So the first one was like general, like scaffolding. It was like database setup. Then it was like DTOs, and it was like UI. And then it was like, it almost broke it down into order of operations. Like, okay, you're going to need to implement this before we implement that. We're going to implement that before we do that. And we're going to do that. And then kind of broke those all down in general, which I thought was like really neat. So again, I didn't use this tool for it, but in my mind, like you said earlier, like you can just do this. But the idea here is that when you run these commands in the CLI, there's literally those 3 commands, which is like specify, plan, and then tasks. The idea is that there's a bunch of LLM work that is helping you out with, I have to imagine like really good system prompts. You know what I mean? That's my imagining, instead of me just doing system prompting on it, it's that. And like what this did is it broke down like fundamentals, domain model, storage, roles, UI work, logging, schedule engine, vacation mode, history, offline sync, accessibility, and then Q&A. So I kind of broke those down into different pieces for it. Then I could go implement basically.
I kind of wish I would like to see who actually put in all this effort here and how much it was tested, because I kind of wish this was just taught to people on like how to design a piece of software. Start with the high level specification, then break it down into a plan, then break it down into tasks, because it's quite edifying, to be honest, to be reading through the templates and the actual commands given to the AI through this Spec Kit thing. In general, it looks to me just like a good procedure for how to design a piece of software. And yeah, sorry, I was a little remiss there. The technical context is a part of the planning step, not the spec step. But yeah, once it has the details on like what technologies you want to use, it's going to figure out roughly a file hierarchy to implement. And then once it's figured out those most basic things, then it'll go into let's break the problem down into a bunch of tasks. So it's like this 3-step process: spec, plan, tasks. I kind of wish, like, because it was illegal to write any waterfall books for the last 20 years. Your title had to say agile. So I think we've kind of lost the art of planning and design. And even if you're not going to use the AI, you probably want to read through these plan specify or specify plan tasks templates, because these are just good questions to ask yourself before you start writing some code, I think, even if you don't want the AI to do all this work for you. But then, as you said, this is like a Mad Libs thing. There's just a bunch of blanks in these templates, and it's going to spawn off more and more AI commands until it has all the details it needs in order to satisfy, do we have a solid plan here or not? And it's going to generate more files, more markdown files. We're going to have so many markdown files in our code base now. And it's just going to keep generating markdown files until it's satisfied that the spec and the plan are satisfied, so it can move on to that tasks step.
Yeah. So what this ends up looking like before you get to the implementation is like when you run this tool, it actually generates and it has all the prompts like in your GitHub folder. So it asks you like, are you using Copilot, are you using Claude, are you using Gemini? And it basically puts things in the right place for you with these prompts that you would then call either from the CLI or even from Copilot. You could just do a / command and say / specify / plan / tasks. Now, like what this ends up happening is when you create these plans, it puts things in a spec folder. Again, this is spec-driven development. So, for example, it would first create, for example, like specs, and then it would, let's say I'm implementing a new chat system. This is like their implementation. Like I'm doing this thing, right? You would then, say I'm going to do a new feature, and then it would generate this plan, and it would do this thing. And it would create an implementation plan. It would do research. It would then break down the implementation details. And then you could even add like manual testing that are into it as well, like how you get through it. So it's basically going to generate all these docs that you can iterate on inside of your project. So again, it's not only just documentation, but it's part of your code base, which I think is so important, because often when I'm iterating and I'm designing these things, I'm like going and I'm using Copilot, but I'm not storing it into my code base, right? So this mechanism, this practice of the spec-driven development with this CLI and these prompts forces you, because the prompt itself is going to then tell and assist the AI to create these files and update these files in the correct place for you every single time.
Yeah. And I want to stress it's that update part's kind of the most important, because the one big critique, and I don't want to sound like waterfall was the end all be all, there's a reason agile came up, was you would write all these specs in the beginning. And then naturally through the software development process, the software would diverge from the specs, or you would start adding features that were never spec'd, or you're implementing things differently than they were spec'd. And almost never do people go backwards and actually update the documentations and those initial specs. They're just kind of archived. They get dusty, cobwebs grow. All of a sudden, you're just throwing it out because it's so far away from the software you actually implemented. The nice thing about this is, because you're just feeding these markdown files constantly into the AI, these actually do become like executable specs, and therefore keeping them up to date benefits you And because it's benefiting you, you do it
Yeah.
because you don't want to type in for the millionth time, no, don't use SQLite. I hate SQLite. You don't
Yeah.
want to type that in every time. So you make sure you update the spec and say, we absolutely do not use SQLite, which, by the way, is terrible advice. You want to use SQLite. Always use
All
SQLite.
the time. That's all I wanted. That was in my spec, was to implement and use
Good.
SQLite and then use these things and then assist, and here's documentation and here's these other link for it as well through it. So
I just want to stress that one more time. I like this more than waterfall because it is executable. It's not the docs aren't just going to sit there and rot. So this is actually an advancement.
So that's what I want to really try on it. And the question is, like, can it plug into an existing application that has no specifications? Fair. Like if I look at feedback flow, it's like they're in a very disorganized spot. So can I like maybe work with this, and start to build out these features that are in there to keep this up to date? And what does that look like? Or is it okay if I only have a spec when I add a new feature to it, for example? Like, what does that look like in general? So I think it's fascinating. I really want to use it on a project. And I might redo the pet insulin one, just like retake my original prompt and work with it, because I'm at file new project almost, and just say, okay, like let me just blow away this thing and like let me start over, basically. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because I can definitely see this working very well in a greenfield application where you have no code and you're just starting from scratch. Yeah, I'm with you. I don't know exactly, even as much experience both of us have had with AIs. I'm not really sure how well it would integrate into a large code base. iCircuit's like 100,000 lines of code. There's a lot of specs that are not spec'd in iCircuit. And could it ever catch up? Is it worth having it catch up? All those things. But I can tell you right now, I'm probably going to start with this for any new app because, one more time, it's easier to write English than it is to change a UI once it's implemented, or change your data model once it's implemented. So it's always good to start here.
Totally. Exactly. And I think that is something that I think about, because what I ended up learning, by the way, to full circle this thing before we wrap out and I go to more meetings, is my conversion actually from the Vibe code Spark to pulling it in, to making a Blazor application, launching that, and then taking it to a Blazor hybrid application. I actually did have a lot of like quirks with it, because again, I wasn't really specifying how it was storing data or what it was doing and how it was working and how to architecture those data structures. Just kind of let it do its thing, which totally worked fine until I started to add new features and do things to it and like document it and see how it was actually working and getting that working in the mobile application. Like I got it all working, but now it's not documented at all, right? It's just in my mind, and hope that it knows going forward that this is the architecture of the app and there's this code here and this is using, it's like it has to now figure out every time that, oh, in the mobile app, it's using SQLite. Oh, and in this one, it's using local DB. Like, okay, it's going to have to figure that out every single time, instead of saying like, here's the specification for the application and here's how it's architected and this and that. Which again, the idea here is we have the high level infrastructure and knowledge, and we can review these specs, look at them, make sure they gel with exactly what we want before then letting it implement, so then it can more one-shot it, hopefully. Big one-shot type of guy over here. So
yeah, and the final thing it does is the task. This is where I get a little bit more nervous, because I was just looking through the task template, and it does have a little bit of a web focus to it. So if you're doing a mobile app, you might need to customize this and that. But I think the spec and the plan part are really solid to start with. I think that just naturally lends itself to any kind of app you're writing. And just as a formal procedure, like just to force yourself, like before you write one line of code, force yourself to go through a specking and planning phase just to make sure you're doing your due diligence.
Yeah. And I've been enjoying it, to be honest with you, as far as like how I've actually been coding for the last 6 months or so, especially even with feedback flow, not to this stringent of a process, but many of these things that are in the Spec-Driven and Spec Kit stuff are things that I have kind of been doing, just not necessarily 100%. You know what I mean?
Yeah. it's a formal system, and there's always pros and cons to that. Whenever you formalize something, that the pros are you're checking all the boxes. It's forcing you to think about things that maybe you don't want to think about or you'd forget to think about. The bad side is always it might be more appropriate for this kind of app versus that kind of app, or this kind of development experience in that. So I think we are still in the Wild West. I think we're going to be getting a few more of these kind of spec-driven things, but this is a fantastic first start, especially for formalizing your own process. Because I was doing this stuff informally. Now it's kind of nice to just have a tool here and just make me go through the pain of specify everything I want.
Formal spec-driven development. That is what we are now, Frank. That is for sure. All right. Well, I think that's going to do. We'll put links to the Spec Kit and the blog post as well there. And we should also have the live stream out that we did with Den. So I'll put that in there. And I haven't done the live stream. So like, actually what's funny about this is like, by the time this podcast comes out, I'll have more information about like everything that's happened and then after, you know what I mean? So it'll be fascinating. So we'll see how it goes. But anyways, yeah, I'm nice that there's some formalization happening. And I think these are all good use cases for, AI to help us be more productive at the end of the day. Whether you want, again, we've talked about it, like none, a little, quite a bit, or a whole lot like me, then, you get to pick and choose exactly
and I like this as an alternative to vibe coding, because I know not everyone wants to just develop software off the cuff. It's good to think through problems.
Exactly. So, all right. Well, I think that's going to do it for this week's Merge Conflict. So until next time, I'm James Montemagno.
And I'm Frank Kruger. Thanks for watching and listening.
Peace.